A year after Tupac's quad shooting, Stretch gets killed.
Right.
And a lot of people wanted to say, oh, that was retaliation because people thought the Stretch set up Tupac. And then Tupac not going to Stretch's funeral sort of, so added to the conspiracy of it all.
Right.
And because that was his close friend.
Well, there's a lot of talk about, who could have possibly known, whatever. Everybody knew. You know what I mean? If little Sean told one of his friends, hey, I'm going and Pac's going to come by and whatever, everybody knew. You know what I mean? Like, and, Stretch was friends with everybody too. Why would it be a big secret to protect him? Like, nobody knew that anyone was going to come rob him at it, So all that stuff is nonsense. Stretch, I heard when he was killed, it had something to do with his brother Majesty, that they were looking for him.
Yeah, I heard that too.
So, it definitely wasn't a Tupac hit. You know what I mean? So, but all this crazy stuff, all this conspiracy nonsense comes about, all this stuff, and it's easily explained away. But if you can't prove something, you can't prove it. And but when I heard about it, I thought I should, that it is history and it was told to me. So.
Well, Tupac gets killed in 1996. And I interviewed Keefe D, who's now in prison. Now in jail, actually, awaiting the trial over his involvement. But the story that Keefe told was that after Tupac and Suge and the Death Row guys jumped Orlando Anderson, Keefe and Orlando and their crew didn't have any guns. They went to go meet up with Eric Von Zip, who was with Foxy Brown at the time, and he gave them the gun. Do you think there's any truth in this? And Eric Von Zip is dead now. Well,
I think Keefe D was in a car and with people, and I think that makes sense that Orlando, all that. I don't believe any of the other stuff associated with the case for a variety of reasons. Simply this. One, I was a part of that task force. I was working the BMF task force. And I think that because of the connection with Wolf, they reached out to me and a DEA agent named Eric Henderson to help them out on the New York side of the investigation, finding guys like Little C's and people that they wanted to come and re-interview for the Biggie case. And so I was out in LA all the time. I became friendly with Greg Kading and members of his task force, and we'd meet and have drinks and things like that. There came a point where they told me, or Greg told me, that members of Puffy's entourage were driving guns across the country and to Vegas, and particularly for the Tyson fight, so that Puff and Biggie would have, and their entourage would have guns to protect themselves. So,
which sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Loading up a car with guns and drive them from New York to Vegas is insane.
So now, I knew Von Zip, not personally. I knew him from investigations before this, and always had the air about him. He's a gentleman gangster. He was based out of like 118th and 8th Avenue in Harlem. Old school guy, knew Puffy's father, Melvin Combs, from back in the day.
He was also dating Puffy's mom.
Right. So that's a good connection. There's no way that this would happen. It doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, Biggie did not go. Puffy didn't go. Where's all the guns? Now there's only one. The story started to change as they told it to me, which means that it was a story that was like they were going over it with a cooperating source or defendant. And I didn't like the fact that it changed because if someone doesn't come in the beginning and tell me the absolute truth, it creates big problems down the line because I always memorialized everything. I'm not going to be one of these detectives where, you changed the story, I'm going to rip up that report, So, And I just started to see some real inconsistencies with it. The other thing is how did Keefe D know that he had a gun? Did he see him in the casino and say, by the way, I have a gun. If you need it to borrow it, just let me know. Did they see him right after the aftermath and say, well, if you need a gun, I have one. You want to come get it? Does not make any sense to me whatsoever. So I think what happened is this. I think that Keefe D was being romanced by these detectives who desperately wanted to solve these cases. And when they spoke to him at length about their involvement in this task force and their interest in the Biggie and the Tupac case, and particularly Puffy, because they were hell-bent on Puffy being involved in this, that the story kind of morphed. And when you see that you need to get out of a long-term sentence, you can read the body language and of your interrogators. And you mention a name and you see them, whatever. And I think that Keefe D created a story that's bigger than it really was. I think that he was there. I think there was the gun there. I do not think that Zip would pass off a gun to anybody or be a part of that nonsense.
Well,
so
I do know that when Keefe started cooperating with Greg Kading, and this was in order to beat a PCP case where he was probably facing 25 years, they had him red-handed and basically said, cooperate or else you're going to jail for 25 years.
Right.
I do know, according to Greg Kading, he even sent me the actual flight tickets that they flew Keefe D out to New York with a wire, allegedly, to try to set up.
I was there.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah.
So you were in New York when Keefe D was trying to set up Eric Von Zip?
We went up to the club, or we went wherever. I was retired, and they invited me because I worked on it. And
so you met up with Keefe D in New York?
I didn't talk to him. He was in a separate car or whatever, but I went up with them to do the operation.
Okay, so this is a fact because, when I interviewed Keefe D in his last interview before he got locked up, he said, no, I never did that. I never went out to New York, whatever else. But this is true. He was flown out to New York and wore a wire to try to set up Eric Von Zip.
And I told him it was the most ridiculous idea in the world.
Because from what I understand, Eric Von Zip wasn't trying to touch it on any level.
If you wanted to try to get him in a conversation, what you do is you get Keefe D and 5 undercover detectives and say, hey, I'm in town. We're going out. Why don't you come join me and whatever. And have a crew of guys around you. You don't go back to a bar and say, hey, those were some days, You know what I mean? Like, hey, remember the time you gave me that gun? Come on. Who does shit like that?
Right.
Like,
well, Greg Kading said that nothing came of it.
Yeah, except it probably tipped him off. He probably figured like, oh, shit.
Right.
I mean, he was no dummy. He stayed out of jail for many years. And
he passed away from cancer eventually. Yes. So... the rumor is that Puffy, the story is, and, Keefe's going to try to push this in his trial, was that Puffy put $1 million hit on Tupac and Suge, and the money was ultimately paid to Eric Von Zip, and Eric Von Zip kept the money and bought a nightclub.
Well, and how did he pay him? He give him a check?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like, so Zip Code used to be a club called Jimmy's Uptown.
Yeah.
And then there's Jimmy's up in the Bronx, whatever. I'm pretty sure it's the same Jimmy he lost a lot of those clubs because he got arrested for money laundering or something over the years. And I know that it was Jimmy's Uptown was the club that Zip bought. So you didn't need $1 million to buy a club that got basically closed down by the feds for money laundering. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Like, Puffy's not going to give you $1 million because some LA gangbanger shot him because he beat you up in the casino. And I think Puffy probably said on numerous occasions, we got to get those motherfuckers or whatever.
Yeah.
But he didn't say, let's go talk in my office on Monday. That's why you have a guy like Zip too, is, hey Zip, I want someone to go kill this fucking guy, whatever. Offer them whatever you can and see what they do. And, some LA gangbanger, right, who's desperate, he'd do it for much less than $1 million.